The fog hung thick over Highway 281 that night, a low, clinging mist that seemed to swallow the beams of Jake Mercer's headlights whole. He'd been driving trucks for most of his life, long enough to know that some stretches of road had their own moods, their own way of watching you from the dark. This part of Texas just outside Blanco felt like that. The kind of place where the night didn't just fall. It sank. The radio crackled with nothing but static, and the hum of the big rig was the only sound keeping him company as the miles crawled by. Jake sipped cold coffee from a dented thermos, his fingers tapping the steering wheel in rhythm. With the wipers as they swiped uselessly at the fog dot, then he saw her dot had started as a shape in the distance, almost like the fog itself had bunched up and formed something human. As the truck rumbled closer, the shape became clearer, a girl, standing on the shoulder of the road, barefoot, hair hanging limp around her face, a white dress, thin enough that he could see the dark outline of her legs beneath it. She didn't move, didn't try to flag him down, just stood there, staring. Jake felt the hairs on his arms rise. His gut told him to keep driving, but something else, maybe guilt, maybe the loneliness that crept in after too many nights on the road, made him ease off the gas. The rig hissed as he brought it to a stop. For a moment, they just looked at each other through the fog and the dirty windshield. "You all right, miss?" he called out through the open window. No answer. Just that stare. He sighed, popped the door, and climbed down, boots crunching on the gravel shoulder. The fog swallowed his legs as he approached her. She looked young, maybe 18 or so, skin pale as the mist around them. Up close, she seemed even thinner, almost fragile, like the fog might lift her off the ground and carry her away. "Where you headed?" Jake asked, glancing up and down the empty highway. "Ain't safe out here." She didn't speak, just lifted her eyes to his, and that look? It was like she was seeing right through him, or maybe seeing something far beyond him. Something. He couldn't. Finally, in a voice soft as a breath, she said, "North." Jake hesitated. He didn't like it. The whole thing felt wrong. But he couldn't just leave her out here. "All right," he muttered, "climb on up." She did, silently, barefoot on the metal steps, leaving damp prints behind. He shut the door, feeling the chill she brought with her fill the cab. As he eased the truck back onto the highway, he tried to make conversation, asked her name, where she was coming from. Nothing. She just stared out the windshield, hands folded in her lap, so still she barely seemed real. The miles slipped by. The fog clung tight. The only sound was the rumble of the engine and Jake's own breathing, loud in his ears. Then she spoke. A whisper, so soft he wasn't sure he heard it at first. "They buried him by the big oak." Jake glanced over. "What's that?" She didn't look at him. Her eyes stayed fixed on the road ahead. By the big oak. They didn't mark the grave. Just left him there. Said no one would find him. A cold knot formed in Jake's stomach. "Who you talking about?" "Miss?" She didn't answer. Just kept staring out into the night, into the fog. Jake felt his skin prickle. He gripped the wheel tighter, glanced around like the fog might part and show him some hidden truth. "He was my brother," she whispered. "They said he ran off. But he didn't. He's still there, waiting." Jake swallowed hard. His mouth felt dry. The truck felt colder now, like the cab had been plunged into ice water. He tried to shake it off, focused on the road. The girl didn't speak again. Not for miles. When she did, it was so soft he almost missed it. "They'll come for you too." Jake's heart pounded. He looked at her, really looked this time. Her skin was so pale it almost glowed in the dashboard light. Her eyes were dark hollows, like she hadn't slept in years. And that dress, it wasn't just thin, it was wet, clinging to her like she just crawled out of water. "What the hell?" He muttered. She turned to him then, slow and deliberate, and smiled. But it wasn't the smile of a young girl. It was something older, colder, a smile that didn't belong in the world of the living. Then she was gone. One moment she was there, and the next nothing. The seat beside him was empty, just empty. Except for the wet stain where she'd been sitting, the dark patch spreading across the cracked vinyl. Jake's hand shook as he gripped the wheel, heart racing, breath coming in ragged gasps. He didn't stop driving, not that night. He kept going, right through the fog, right past Blanco, past anything familiar. He drove until the sun came up and the fog burned off, and even then, he didn't stop. Because when he glanced at the seat beside him, sometimes he swore he could still see that wet stain. Still hear her whisper, "They'll come for you too." There's a stretch of road in Caldwell County that locals whisper about when the sun dips behind the hills. A stretch that ain't on most maps. Though if you ask the right people in Lulling or Lockhart, they'll point you to it with a nervous look. Route 666, the Devil's Backbone, twists through scrubland and rocky outcrops, with gnarled mesquites clawing at the sky like bony fingers. Folks say it ain't just the heat haze that makes the road shimmer at dusk. They say things walk that road. Things that shouldn't dot. It was a sticky August evening when the four of them, Cody, Rafe, Jen, and Sierra, decided to tempt fate. They weren't from around there. City kids from Austin who thought country legends were just that. Cody had borrowed his older brother's Dodge Charger, and the plan was simple. Tear down Route 666, find the spot near Dead Man's Curve, and wait for the ghost dog, the hellhound of the backbone. Supposedly, it raced beside you, eyes like burning coals, breath like smoke. And if you outran it, you'd never see it again. But if it caught you, well, no one could say. No one who came back anyway. Come on, Cody, Jen said as she lit a cigarette with shaking fingers, though she'd never admit the tremble wasn't from excitement. This is dumb. Cody grinned, cocky in the way only an 18-year-old with the keys to a muscle car could be. What's the matter, Jen? Scared of a fairy tale? Rafe slapped the roof of the car. Let's just do this already. If we don't see anything, we can hit that gas station in Lulling for beer before they close. Sierra was the quiet one, always watching, always listening. She stared out at the blacktop ahead, the long scar of road cutting through land that felt old and mean. We shouldn't be here, she said softly. This place, it doesn't want us here. They laughed at her, but it sounded hollow, like they knew she was right and didn't want to admit it. The Charger's engine roared to life, shattering the uneasy quiet. Cody slammed it into gear, and they shot off down the backbone, tires kicking up dust that hung in the thick night air. The moon was a thin, sickle-shaped grin in the sky, and stars hid behind low, heavy clouds. The world felt too quiet. No crickets. No wind. Just the hum of tires on asphalt and the thrum of the V8. They sped past mile markers, so old they were half swallowed by the earth. Cody's knuckles were white on the wheel, his grin fading as the road began to feel wrong beneath them, like it was stretching, pulling them deeper into somewhere they shouldn't go. And then they saw it. First, just a flicker at the edge of the headlights, a shape, low and fast, keeping pace with them. The hair on Cody's arm stood on end, and Jen stopped laughing. It's there, Rafe breathed, pressing his face to the glass. It's real. It looked like a dog, yeah, but bigger. Too big. Its coat was pitch black, like a hole in the night, and its eyes. God, its eyes glowed like molten metal. It ran without sound, its paws not touching the ground, or if they did, they left nothing behind. No dust, no prints. Cody floored it. 80, 90. The Charger shook, and the ghost dog stayed right beside them, its head turned, watching them with those burning eyes. jaws open in a grin too wide, too full of teeth. The landscape blurred by. The mesquites turned to clawing shadows. And then, just as quick as it had appeared, the dog was gone. Vanished into the night like smoke. They whooped, nervous and giddy. Cody eased off the gas, heart pounding like a drum, but the relief was short-lived. Sound, soft at first, like nails on steel, came from the trunk. Then louder, a screech of tearing metal. Sierra screamed. Cody swerved, the car fishtailing on loose gravel at the edge of the road. Rafe twisted in his seat. Something's back there. What the hell is that? The trunk buckled inward like something massive was pressing against it. The Charger's rear window spiderwebbed and a wet, meaty thud shook the car. They could hear it breathing now, a deep, rattling growl that didn't sound like any dog. It sounded bigger, older, hungrier. Cody slammed his foot down, but the Charger felt sluggish, like they were driving through mud. The engine whined, desperate, but the speedometer dropped. 50. 40. The thing tore through the trunk like it was paper. They didn't see claws, didn't see teeth, just darkness. Darkness that reached for them, that spilled into the car. Like smoke, like ink, like night itself had come alive. Rafe tried to open his door, but it wouldn't budge. Jeanne was sobbing, curled in on herself. Sierra whispered prayers, eyes squeezed shut as the car groaned and shuddered. The darkness wrapped around them, and in it, they could hear voices, low and cruel, whispering in words they couldn't understand, but felt in their bones. And then silence. When Cody opened his eyes, the Charger was parked on the side of the road. The trunk was pristine. No scratches, no dents. The windows were intact. The engine idled like nothing had happened. But the others were gone. Rafe, Jen, Sierra vanished without a sound, without a trace. Only Cody remained, hand still clutched to the wheel, sweat pouring down his face. The passenger seat was empty. The back seat empty, no blood. No sign they'd ever been there. And when Cody looked into the rearview mirror, he saw those burning eyes staring back at him, just for a second, before they faded into the night. He didn't tell anyone what happened. Who would believe him? But if you drive Route 666 late at night, you might pass a man walking that road, eyes hollow, skin pale, muttering to himself about a race he should have never run, and a debt that can never be repaid. And if you see the dog, don't run. Whatever follows is worse. It was the kind of night when the Texas Hill Country seems to fold in on itself. The wind carried a dry, bitter smell of mesquite and cedar, and the stars hung low, like watchful eyes in the blackness above. Hank Mosley guided his old Ford down State Highway 16, the headlights carving a pale yellow path through the dark. He'd been up in Kerrville all day, tending to some business at the feed store, and now all he wanted was to get back to his spread outside Bandera. His bones ached from years of hard ranch work, his eyes heavy, but there was comfort in the thought of his little house at the end of the dirt road, the porch light glowing, his wife June waiting inside, maybe with coffee on, and his boy Caleb, already asleep, his toy horse clutched in his small hand. But as he crested a low ridge and started down the slope toward the Medina River, his headlights swept over a figure on the shoulder of the road. A man, hunched, his face hidden behind his hands, his thin shoulders trembling. Hank slowed instinctively, heart sinking. Folks didn't walk this highway at night unless something was bad wrong. He pulled over, the truck's tires crunching gravel. The man didn't look up, just stayed there weeping. Not loud, not like a drunk or a crazy, but soft, steady, like the kind of sorrow that seeped deep into a man's soul and won't let go. Hank rolled down the window. "You all right there, friend?" The man didn't answer. Hank hesitated. Common sense said leave him be, Keep driving. The world was full of trouble you didn't need to invite. But there was something in the way the man shook, the hopeless sag of him that tugged at Hank's gut. He opened the door and stepped out, boots scuffing the asphalt. "Where you headed?" Hank asked, approaching slow, like he might have spooked. The man lowered his hands just enough for Hank to see his face, pale and gaunt with hollow eyes that shone wet in the light. His lips quivered like he was trying to speak but couldn't find the words. "Come on, I'll give you a ride," Hank said, nodding toward the truck. "Ain't safe out here at night." The man climbed in without a word. Hank got back behind the wheel, the cab filling with the smell of dust and old sweat. The man stared out the window, tears running down his cheeks, silent as death. Hank tried for conversation. "Name's Hank. You from around here?" "Nothing. Just the soft sound of weeping, steady as a heartbeat." Hank swallowed and faced forward, focusing on the road. The night seemed darker now, the stars hidden behind thin, drifting clouds. The truck's engine hummed low, the tires whispering over the blacktop. They drove like that for miles. Hank's skin prickled, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The man's sobs never stopped, never changed, like a broken record of grief. And every so often, when Hank glanced sideways, he thought he saw the man's face blur, like heat haze on the horizon. The turnoff to Hank's place came up, a narrow dirt track leading down toward the creek and his house beyond. He hesitated. But then, figuring the man was headed south, he swung the wheel. The stranger made no move, no protest, just kept crying, quiet and steady. When the house came into view, dark against the pale wash of starlight, Hank felt the first real flicker of unease. The porch light was off. No glow from the windows. Number. June, no coffee, no nothing. The place looked abandoned. He pulled up, heart thudding now. "Wait here," Hank said, voice tight. He stepped out, boots crunching dry grass, and mounted the porch. The door was ajar, just a crack, swinging a little in the breeze. Inside, the air was cold and still. No smell of coffee. No sign of June's knitting basket by the rocker. No Caleb's toys scattered on the floor. The house was empty, hollow, like nobody'd ever lived there at all. Hank's throat closed. He stumbled through the rooms, calling their names. No answer. No photographs on the walls. No clothes in the closets. The bed was made, smooth and untouched. The kitchen table bare. It was as if his life had been erased, scrubbed clean by some invisible hand. He ran outside, breath ragged. The truck was still there, but the man was gone. The door hung open, the seat empty, and in the dirt at Hank's feet were wet spots, drops of something that could have been water, or tears dot the windrows, carrying the faintest sound. Like a man crying, far off in the dark. Hank turned in circles, heart pounding, but saw nothing, just the endless stretch of Texas night. He stayed out there until dawn, searching, calling, hoping. But the world had shifted somehow, slipped sideways into a place where June and Caleb had never been. The neighbors claimed they didn't know him. The sheriff shook his head, said no such family lived out there. The house, they said, had been empty for years. Old Mosley place. Been up for sale forever. Hank stayed on, living in the hollow shell of that house, driving up and down State Highway 16 night after night, hoping to find the weeping man again, hoping to bargain or beg or curse him into giving his family back. But the stranger never showed. Only the wind and the stars and the long, empty road stretching on forever. The night was thick and heavy, the kind of night that clung to your skin and made the air feel like soup. The moon hung low and swollen, casting pale light on FM 170, that lonely stretch of road that followed the dark curves of the Rio Grande, like a snake tracking its prey. The river road, they called it. A ribbon of asphalt winding between cliffs and river. The kind of place where headlights vanished into the void, and the world felt like it ended just beyond the bend Melissa gripped. The steering wheel tighter, knuckles pale against the cracked leather. The old Chevy's headlights cut a weak path through the darkness, and the hum of the engine was the only sound apart from the hiss of tires on the blacktop. Beside her, in the passenger seat, her younger sister Jamie fidgeted with the dial on. The radio, trying to tune in anything other than static. The stations out here were either Spanish-language ballads that made the night feel lonelier or bursts of AM preachers screaming about hellfire. Tonight, neither felt right. "Just leave it," Melissa said, voice tight. Her eyes flicked to the rearview mirror, though she knew there wouldn't be anyone back there. There never was. "It's making it worse." Jamie sighed and crossed, her arms leaning her head against the window. The glass was warm from the day's heat, but outside the desert was cooling fast, and a chill crept up from the river. Even with the windows rolled up, they could feel it a damp, unnatural cold, as if the Rio Grande itself was exhaling in the dark. They had set out late from Presidio, thinking they'd make it to Terlingua before midnight, but the night had a way of stretching out on FM 170. The road seemed longer than it should be, the miles dragging, the curves sharper, the cliffs closer. The river always there, glinting like black oil in the moonlight. Melissa squinted ahead, where the headlights barely illuminated the next bend. That's when she saw it, the first one. A rider, or what looked like one, a shape on horseback, dark against the darker cliffside, standing motionless at the edge of the road. The horse's head was bowed, its form strange, almost wrong in proportion. The rider sat stiff, face hidden beneath the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat, and both horse and rider seemed to shimmer at the edges like heat rising off the desert in midday. But there was no heat now, only cold. "Did you see that?" Melissa's voice cracked out. Jamie sat up, wide-eyed. "What?" "There," but by the time she pointed, the rider was gone. Jamie swallowed hard. "You're just tired." But Melissa wasn't so sure. A prickle ran down her spine, a cold that settled in her bones. She pressed the gas a little harder, the engine groaning as they rounded the bend. And that's when they saw the others, riders. 3, maybe 4. Shadowy figures that stood or hovered just off the shoulder, their outlines strange and flickering. One of the horses, if that's what it was, lifted its head, and Melissa saw that its eyes glowed faintly red like dying coals. The riders didn't move, didn't wave, didn't speak. They just watched as the Chevy passed, silent and still, like sentries at the edge of a graveyard. Jamie gasped. "What the hell are they?" Melissa didn't answer. She didn't know. All she could do was drive faster now, the speedometer climbing as the road narrowed and twisted along the river. The shadows kept pace. No matter how sharp the turn or steep the climb, they were there just beyond the reach of the headlights, floating along the cliff's edge, gliding over the rocks, their horses' hooves not touching the ground. Sometimes they seemed closer, sometimes farther, but always there. And then she heard it, a low thudding like distant drums. Except it wasn't distant. It was keeping rhythm with the Chevy's tires, echoing under the roar of the engine. Hooves. The sound of hooves on stone. Except FM 170 was paved, and the sound came from the cliffs above and the riverbank below. It surrounded them, a hollow, relentless beat that seemed to grow louder with every mile. Jamie was crying now, whispering under her breath, prayers their grandmother had taught them long ago. Spanish words, old words meant to ward off evil. But the words felt small in the vast, empty dark. Melissa's hands ached from gripping the wheel. The road narrowed even more, and the river was close now, black and wide, a slick mirror reflecting the cold moonlight. A guardrail ran along the edge, rusted and dented, a poor barrier between the road and the drop to the water below. The riders were pressing in, their shapes clearer now. Melissa could see the ragged clothes hanging from their frames, the empty sockets where eyes should be, the teeth bared in silent snarls. The horses were worse gaunt and twisted, with patches of hide missing, bones jutting through, and those eyes, those terrible burning eyes. The Chevy's engine screamed as Melissa pushed it harder, the tires skimming the edge of traction on the tight turns. The road seemed endless, the shadows always there, driving them forward, herding them toward the river's edge. And then she saw it, a break in the guardrail, a place where the cliffside had crumbled, leaving a gap that led straight into the black water below. "No," Melissa hissed, as if saying it out loud would stop what was coming. The riders fanned out, forming a wall of shadows ahead. Their horses reared, but there was no sound, no scream, no whinny, just that pounding of phantom hooves. The only way forward was through them, or over the edge. Melissa slammed on the brakes, the car fishtailing, tires shrieking against the pavement. The Chevy slid to a stop inches from the gap, the river yawning below. The shadows closed in, surrounding the car, pressing against the glass. Faces so close she could see the hollow pits of their eyes, the rotted flesh, the cracked teeth. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The message was clear, into the fade. Water. Melissa's heart hammered so loud she couldn't hear Jamie's sobs anymore. The car rocked, as if pushed by unseen hands. The river called, silent and dark, promising an end, promising peace or something else. And then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, the riders were gone. The thudding hooves faded. The air grew still. Melissa and Jamie sat frozen, the car teetering at the edge of the drop. The night was silent again, except for the ticking of the cooling engine and the soft lapping of water far below. Slowly, Melissa shifted the car into reverse, inching it back onto the road, away from the gap, away from the river's grasp. They drove the rest of the way in silence, the shadows gone, but the cold lingering. And long after the sun rose over the desert, they could still feel eyes watching them, waiting, somewhere along the river road. US 87 cuts through the heart of Texas like an old scar, faded at the edges, but deep enough that it still aches when the weather turns. It's a long, lonely stretch of highway, the kind that seems to stretch forever, the kind where even time seems to slow down, the kind where a man could lose his mind watching the endless blacktop and the flickering glow of dying gas station signs. It was just past midnight when Officer Tim Harlow found himself out there, the radio crackling with static, the night heavy with heat and silence. The rookie had only been on the force for 6 months, still too green to know when to trust his gut. And tonight, his gut was screaming. The call had come through just after 11. Reports of a semi barreling down US 87 at insane speeds, nearly forcing a family off the road near Eden. The dispatcher's voice had been tight, strained. Unit 12 were getting multiple calls. Big rig, black cab. No markings, plates unreadable, driver unresponsive. Tim had answered before he even thought. It was his sector, his responsibility. Besides, how bad could it be? A drunk driver, a runaway trucker trying to make up lost time. Nothing he couldn't handle. The night air seared his lungs as he stepped out of his cruiser at the shoulder to get a sense of the land. The wind was hot, carrying the smell of dust and old asphalt. Far in the distance, the faint glow of headlights began to swell in the darkness. And then he heard it, the deep rolling growl of a diesel engine pushed way beyond what it should handle. The kind of sound that vibrates in your bones, that makes your heart race because it doesn't sound quite right, like something's broken deep inside that machine, but it refuses to die. Tim jumped back into his cruiser, flipped on his lights, and pulled out onto the road. The semi roared past him before he could even accelerate, a blur of black steel and shrieking tires. No trailer. Just the cab, a massive black beast that seemed to shimmer in the heat. His breath caught as he caught sight of the cab's rear. The metal looked warped, melted in places, as if it had been through a fire. The windows were dark, no glint of light from inside, no sign of a driver. But still, it flew down the highway like a demon on fire. He hit the siren, floored the gas, and gave chase. The cruiser's engine whined in protest as he pushed it, the red and blue lights painting the endless road in wild streaks of color. The truck didn't slow, didn't swerve, didn't acknowledge him at all. It just kept going, faster and faster, as if the driver couldn't hear or didn't care. Dispatch. This is Unit 12. Tim barked into the radio, his knuckles white on the wheel. I'm in pursuit of that semi, heading south on 87. No trailer. No response from driver. I'm doing 90 and can't catch up. The radio hissed. Then silence. Then a voice low and uneasy. Unit 12, be advised, we're pulling up the file. You sure that's a black cab? No markings? Yeah, Tim said. His mouth was dry. Black cab. Looks like it's been through hell. There was another long pause on the line. Tim, there's no way you're seeing that truck. That sounds like... The dispatcher cut off. A breath. A decision not to say whatever it was. Proceed with caution. The cruiser shuddered as the speedometer crept past 100. The truck remained a dark shape in the distance, always just out of reach. Tim could see it clearer now. The sides scorched, the tires leaving no marks on the asphalt, the cabs. Windows reflecting nothing but the night. His skin crawled. His gut twisted. The engine's roar was deafening now, not just from his own car, but from the beast ahead. A sound like metal screaming in agony. And then he saw it. The driver's side door, it hung loose, flapping in the wind. And behind it, through the window, a face. Or what was left of one. A man's face, charred and blackened, eyes hollow and blazing with an unnatural fire. The mouth twisted in. A rictus grin, teeth gritted in endless fury or pain. And Tim swore to God, that thing was staring right at him. The cruiser's lights flickered. The engine sputtered once, twice. The radio filled with static and voices. Voices whispering things he couldn't understand. Voices that chilled his blood. Voices that sounded like they'd been buried in the dirt for 100 years. He gritted his teeth, slammed the gas. Pedal to the floor, heart hammering in his chest. Suddenly, the truck swerved. Not left or right. It veered straight off the road onto a stretch of old cracked shoulder and then down into the scrub brush. Tim yanked the wheel, skidding to a stop at the edge of the highway, dust boiling up around him. He watched wide-eyed. As the semi tore through the brush, unstoppable, unstoppable, until it vanished. Swallowed whole by the night, the cruiser's engine died. The world went silent. The only sound was the soft ticking of the hot engine cooling down and his own ragged breathing. His hand shook as he grabbed the radio. "Dispatch," he rasped. "The truck, it went off the road. I'm going after it on foot." "Negative, Unit 12. The dispatcher's voice was sharp now, frightened. "Stay in your vehicle. Backup is en route." But Tim didn't hear. Or maybe he did and just didn't care. Something was pulling at him, some dark compulsion, some need to see where the hell. That thing went. He drew his flashlight and his sidearm and stepped out into the night, the heat pressing down on him like a weight. The brush was dry and brittle beneath his boots, snapping and crunching with each step. The beam of his flashlight cut through the dark, revealing nothing but endless scrub and dirt. No tire tracks. No broken branches. No sign that anything had come through here at all. He kept walking, deeper into the black, heart pounding loud enough that it seemed to echo in his ears. And then, faint at first but growing stronger, he heard it. The low, guttural growl of that engine, somewhere out there in the dark. He froze, every instinct screaming at him to turn back, to run. But his feet moved forward anyway, as if drawn by some invisible chain dot, and then he saw it, parked in a small clearing. The cab idling, the headlights dead, the cab door swinging slowly in the breeze. He raised his gun, hands trembling. "Come out," he called, voice cracking. "Show yourself." The engine died. The night was swallowed by silence again. The door creaked to a stop, and from the cab, something stepped out. A figure, burned beyond recognition, flesh blackened and hanging in tatters, the sockets of its eyes glowing with that same hellish fire. The smell hit him then, the stench of burned meat and diesel fuel and something worse, something ancient. And rotten dot the thing raised a hand, as if beckoning. And then it spoke, its voice like the grinding of broken metal. "Company. I need company." Tim ran. He ran like he'd never run in his life, crashing through the brush, stumbling, falling, scrambling to his feet again. He didn't stop until he reached the cruiser, diving inside, slamming the door, fumbling for the ignition. The engine roared to life. He spun the car around, tires spitting dust, and tore back up onto US 87, heart slamming against his ribs. Tears streaming down his face. In the rearview mirror, he saw the truck again, rolling back onto the highway, gaining on him, no lights, no sound. Just that hulking black shape, unstoppable, relentless. And behind the wheel, that face, that grinning, burned, hateful face, watching him, waiting. Somewhere inside, he knew. He'd seen it, he'd been marked. And no matter how fast he drove, no matter where he ran, that truck would be there, waiting, chasing, because the dead driver of that hellbound semi wasn't done yet, and Tim wasn't going to outrun him. Not tonight. Not ever. It started with the hum of tires on cracked asphalt and the soft rhythm of rain tapping against the windshield. Daniel kept his eyes on the road, squinting against the curtain of mist that rolled off the dark plains outside San Angelo. The wipers worked overtime, smearing the streaks of water, but it didn't help much. Beside him, Alyssa leaned her head against the cool glass, watching the occasional flash of lightning turn the night into stark, black and white snapshots of lonely trees and endless fields. The radio had long since crackled into static, and their phones showed no signal bars. They hadn't meant to take this route. The plan was to stick to the main highway, get to their cabin at Twin Buttes before the storm hit. But somewhere near the city's edge, Daniel had missed a turn. The GPS froze on them, and now they were winding along Highway 67, where the world seemed empty except for the little sedan and the whispering rain. "Did you see that sign?" Alyssa asked suddenly, sitting up straighter. "No," Daniel muttered, hands tight on the wheel. His knuckles were pale. "What did it say?" "Something about a bridge." "Road closed, I think." She turned, trying to peer through the back window, but it was useless in the dark and rain. Daniel exhaled, frustrated. "I didn't see any barricade." Neither of them spoke for a few moments. The only sound was the tires hissing along wet pavement. Then the road curved, and there it was. The bridge. It seemed to rise out of the night like a relic from another time, its iron trusses blackened with age and half lost in shadow. The headlights barely touched the other side. The bridge looked narrow, almost too narrow for modern cars. The river below roared in the dark, swollen from the storm. "Daniel, I don't like this." Alyssa whispered. He hesitated, foot hovering over the brake. But then he shook his head. "We can't turn around here. I'll just go slow. It's just a bridge." They rolled forward, the car's beams illuminating the rusted structure piece by piece. The rain intensified, drumming against the roof, and the air felt heavier, charged. Like the moment before a power outage. As they crossed the midpoint, a terrible sound rose from below. At first, it seemed like the wind catching the steel girders. But then it grew louder, distinct, a high, ragged scream, as if the river itself were howling in agony. Alyssa clapped her hands over her ears. "What is that?" Daniel's heart pounded. He slammed his foot on the accelerator, desperate to reach the other side. But no matter how the speedometer climbed, the bridge stretched on, endless, as if they were driving in place. The scream grew louder, filling the car, rattling the glass. The headlights flickered, and then the bridge vanished. The car plunged forward into nothingness. For a second, there was only the sensation of falling, the river's black mouth rushing up to swallow them whole. The crash was brutal, steel crumpling, glass exploding, the cold slap of water. The world became chaos, the groan of twisting metal, Alyssa's cry, the river's roar. And then silence. Daniel awoke to the soft patter of rain. He was back behind the wheel, headlights cutting through the mist. Alyssa sat beside him, staring out at the dark fields. The static of the dead radio filled the cabin. His heart raced. "Did we?" he began. Alyssa turned, her face pale. Daniel ... I think we crashed. I remember the river, the scream, the water. He blinked, shaking his head as if to clear it. The road ahead curved gently, and there it was again. The bridge, rising from the night like a corpse dredged up from deep water. No. Daniel gasped, his hands trembling on the wheel. He tried to stop, but the brakes didn't respond. The car rolled forward as if pulled by invisible chains. Alyssa sobbed, clutching his arm. "We're not supposed to be here. This isn't real. Daniel, please." The bridge stretched on forever, and the scream began again, rising from below, the sound of 1,000 lost souls crying out in endless torment. The rain became a torrent, and the headlights flickered wildly. Daniel's vision blurred with tears. Or rain, he couldn't tell which. Once more, the bridge fell away beneath them. Once more, they plunged into the river's icy embrace, the crash ripping through their bodies, the water closing over their heads. And once more, Daniel woke to the hum of tires on cracked asphalt, the soft rhythm of rain on the windshield, the dead radio static filling the car. "Alyssa?" He whispered. She was there, as before, staring out into the dark. But her eyes, they weren't the same. Something hollow had crept into them. A knowing. A resignation. "Daniel," she said, her voice flat and distant. "We can't leave." Panic surged through him. He gripped the wheel so hard his fingers ached. He tried to swerve, to stop, to turn around, but the car kept rolling forward, as if on rails. The bridge loomed ahead, the iron bones of it glistening with rain. The scream echoed again, louder this time, so loud it felt like it came from inside his own skull. He realized, with a sick twist in his gut, that he could see shapes on the bridge now, shadowy figures standing along the sides, watching as they passed. Faces pale and twisted, mouths open in silent, eternal screams. Eyes that glowed faintly in the dark, following the car's every move. Ghosts of others who'd taken this path and never left. Alyssa's breath fogged the glass as she whispered, "We're part of it now." The bridge fell away beneath them, and the river claimed them again. And again. And again. And each time Daniel awoke, it was with a little less of himself left behind. The rain kept falling. The scream kept rising. The bridge kept waiting. And Highway 67 stretched on into the night, a road with no end and no escape. The night was hotter than hell itself, the kind of heat that sticks to your skin like wet rags and makes your breath taste of ash. The old-timer name was Clyde Jarrett, though nobody called him anything but Pops for the last 20 years. Wiped a sleeve across his forehead and squinted through the cracked windshield of his battered '78 Chevy pickup. The dashboard clock had been broken since Reagan was president, and the radio only hissed static, but Pops figured it had to be well past midnight. He was somewhere on FM 666, that lonely stretch of two-lane blacktop that cuts through the scrubland of Nueces County like a scar. He hadn't meant to be out this late. Hell, he hadn't meant to be out at all. But the bottle of cheap whiskey sitting empty on the passenger seat had other plans, and so did the memory of his late wife, God rest her soul. The house was too quiet, the bed too empty. So he drove. The moon was hidden behind a smear of clouds, and the stars were as dim as old lanterns. The only light came from his truck's weak headlights, casting yellow cones into the dark. The road shimmered ahead, heat rising off the asphalt like invisible flames. The air stank of something burned, something gone to ruin. Pops blinked and rubbed his eyes. The whiskey haze was thick, but not so thick he didn't notice the figure standing in the road up ahead. At first he thought it was a mirage, just the heat playing tricks. But as he drew closer, the shape didn't waver. A man, or what was left of one. Pops slammed on the brakes, tires skidding on the soft shoulder. The truck came to a halt, engine rumbling like some restless beast. The figure didn't move. It just stood there, in the middle of FM 666, as still as a scarecrow. Even in the dim glow of his headlights, Pops could see the man's skin, or what passed for it, was blackened and split, charred like meat left too long on the grill. Bits of bone gleamed where flesh had burned away, and the man's clothes hung in tatters, fused to his ruined body. Pops felt his throat go dry, and not from the heat. Jesus wept, he whispered, crossing himself without thinking. The burnt man's head tilted, as if hearing him, and that's when Pops felt it, the heat. Not the kind that rolls off the Texas earth in summer, no. This was different. This heat clawed at him from the inside out, like he'd swallowed coal dust and it had caught fire in his belly. His skin prickled, and the air seemed to thicken, heavy and hot as a forge. He threw the truck into reverse, tires spitting up gravel, but the burnt man took a step forward. Then another, slow, steady, relentless. Pops could see no fire, no flames, no smoke, but God help him, the heat kept rising. The steering wheel was hot under his hands. The cracked vinyl seat seared the backs of his legs. His mouth tasted like copper, and sweat poured down his face, stinging his eyes. The truck's engine sputtered, coughed, and died. No, no, no. Pops pounded the dash, turned the key again and again. Nothing but a click, like the sound of a coffin lid shutting. Outside, the burnt man drew closer. Pops could hear the crunch of his boots, or what was left of them, on the gravel shoulder. The heat was unbearable now. The windshield began to fog from the inside, steam curling along the glass like ghostly fingers. Pops grabbed the door handle, but it was too hot to touch. He yelped and snatched his hand back, the skin already reddening, small blisters rising. On his palm, he tried the passenger door, same damn thing. The metal was scorching. The windows wouldn't budge. The crank spun uselessly in his shaking hand. The burnt man was at the hood now, his head cocked at that unnatural angle, empty sockets fixed on Pops. The smell hit him, then burned hair, scorched flesh, the stink of death cooked over coals. And under it all, something worse. Something rotten. Pops could feel the heat inside his lungs now, each breath like sucking on molten glass. His vision blurred, and dark spots danced before his eyes. The burnt man raised one blackened hand, fingers curled like claws, and the temperature. Inside the cab soared. The old seat covers began to smolder, smoke rising in thin threads. The plastic of the dashboard bubbled and warped. Pops did the only thing left to do. He prayed. Whispered words to a God he hadn't spoken to in years. Begged forgiveness for sins long buried. He shut his eyes, waiting for the end, waiting for the fire to consume him. But it didn't. The heat broke, sudden as a summer storm. The air cooled, the smoke cleared. When Pops opened his eyes, the burnt man was gone. Just the empty road ahead, stretching into the dark. He sat there for what felt like hours, shivering now, though the night was still warm. Finally, the truck coughed back to life as if nothing had happened. He drove, slow and careful, hands trembling on the wheel, until the sun rose over the scrubland, turning the world gold. Pops never spoke of that night, but he never drove FM 666 again either. And sometimes, on the hottest nights, when the air burns and the world smells of smoke, he wakes gasping, the taste of ash in his mouth, certain that the burnt man is still out there waiting. The night had fallen thick and heavy across West Texas, the kind of night that seemed to swallow the stars whole. The high desert was a black sea, the brush and rock formations like islands barely hinted at by the dim glow of a gibbous moon. The endless ribbon of I-10 cut through it all, cracked and bleached in the day but now slick and dark like an oil spill under the truck's high beams. Danny Rourke had been driving for nearly 12 hours straight, his hands welded to the wheel, his body sore from the rumble of the Peterbilt. He was making good time, pushing east out of El Paso with a load of industrial wire for some plant outside of San Antonio. The CB was dead, the airwaves quiet as a grave. No chatter, no warnings, no weather reports. Just the sound of his engine and the hum of tires on asphalt. Danny was used to the loneliness of the long haul, preferred it even. After his divorce, after the bottle, after the brawls and nowhere bars, the road was all he had left. He could disappear between the mile markers and no one would notice. But tonight felt different. There was a heaviness in the air, like a storm trying to push through, except the sky was clear. No lightning on the horizon, just that crushing dark dot it started with. The headlights behind him. He noticed them sometime after he passed the exit for Fort Stockton, where a battered sign pointed to an old rest stop that he'd seen 100 times but never used. The lights came up fast, too fast for another rig. Bright, high beams that seemed to flare and burn in his mirrors. He squinted, reached to adjust the glass, but it didn't help. Whoever it was, they were right on him, riding his ass like they wanted him to move over. Except there was nowhere to go. The shoulder was narrow and broken, littered with scraps of blown tires and sun-bleached bones of roadkill. Then the lights weren't just behind him. They were beside him, too. A line of them, as if they'd come out of nowhere. No sound of engines overtaking him, no Doppler whine of another truck passing. Just lights. A convoy of dull green military transports, big boxy shapes like something out of an old war movie, their paint matte and faded, their tires so smooth they didn't seem to grip the road at all. They moved in eerie silence, keeping pace with his rig, boxing him in like he was some kind of target. Danny felt the first ripple of unease work down his spine. He reached for the CB, flicked it on, and tried to hail them. Breaker 19, who's out here on I-10? Y'all got a convoy or what? This is Rourke in the Red Pete. Come back. Nothing. Just static, soft and whispering, like breath on the line. He tried again, voice tighter now. Military units, you're boxing me in. Can't pass, can't break. Come back over. Still nothing. And that's when he glanced sideways, his curiosity beating back the dread for just a second. He looked into the cab of the truck pacing him on the left. The driver's window was down, glass shattered long ago, the jagged edges catching the moonlight like broken teeth. The figure inside was hunched forward over the wheel, head cocked at a strange angle. And the face, Christ almighty, the face, wasn't a face at all. It was a skull, yellowed bone tight against the shape of what had once been a man. The hollows of the eyes deep and black, empty sockets fixed straight ahead. The bony fingers curled around the wheel, unmoving as if frozen. In place, Danny's breath hitched in his throat. He whipped his head to the right, half hoping he'd imagined it. But no, the same. Another skeletal driver, this one wearing the tattered remnants of a military cap, the insignia too faded to make out. Its jaw hung slack as if it was trying to scream or laugh, but no sound came. There was nothing in those cabs. No life. Number. Flesh. Just the dead, piloting those ancient machines, their empty eyes locked on the road and him. He felt the sweat break out on his palms, slicking the wheel. His heart slammed against his ribs, fast and hard. He wanted to slow down, to let them pass, but they wouldn't let him. Every time he eased up, so did they. Every time he tried to accelerate, they matched him, their engines, if they had any, silent as the grave. The headlights bled into his mirrors, blinding him, the trucks pressing in closer, closer. Danny's mind raced. Maybe he was too tired. Maybe the highway was playing tricks on him, the way it did late at night when the fatigue started eating at the edges of reason. But no hallucination felt like this. No dream smelled like the charred stink of old diesel and rot that was beginning to fill his cab. He could taste it on his tongue, bitter and hot, like smoke from a burned-out wreck. The road stretched on, endless and empty, no other lights, no other signs of life. Just him and the convoy of the damned. His GPS flickered and died. His dashboard lights dimmed, then came back on, then dimmed again. The radio crackled, and for a second, just a second, he thought he heard voices. Low, guttural voices, like men speaking through water or through the grave dirt itself. Then they were gone, leaving only the hum of his engine and the pounding of his pulse in his ears. Desperate, Danny scanned the roadside for any turnoff, any exit, any place he could escape. But there was nothing. The world had narrowed down to blacktop and ghosts. He gritted his teeth, white-knuckled the wheel, and did the only thing he could think of. He jammed his foot down on the accelerator, the big Peterbilt roaring as it surged forward, tires screaming against the pavement. For a heartbeat, it worked. The convoy seemed to fall behind, their trucks fading into the darkness. Relief surged through him, wild and shaky. But then, impossibly, they were there again, right on him. Closer than before. Close enough that he swore he could feel the cold. Coming off them, a deep, bone-deep cold that seeped through the steel of his cab and into his flesh. He could hear them now, the clatter of dry bones against the wheels, the whisper of voices carried on the desert wind. Danny didn't know how long it lasted. Minutes? Hours. Time had no meaning on that stretch of highway anymore. He drove like a man possessed, the needle on his speedometer flirting with the red, his breath coming in ragged gasps. And then, as suddenly as they'd appeared, the trucks were gone. No headlights, no shapes in the dark, just the empty road. Stretching on toward dawn, when he finally made it to a truck stop on the outskirts of San Antonio, Danny stumbled from his cab, pale and shaking, the smell of smoke and decay still clinging to his clothes. He tried to tell the others, tried to explain. But they just looked at him with pity or amusement, like he was another old trucker with too many miles behind him and too much coffee in his veins. Danny knew the truth. Somewhere out there on I-10, that convoy was still rolling. And someday, it would box in another rig, another lonely soul on the midnight highway. Someday, it would come for him again. Because the dead don't rest easy on that stretch of road. Not anymore. The night air hung heavy over the empty stretch of Highway 90, the kind of thick, humid darkness that made the inside of the car feel like a sealed tomb. Maria clenched the steering wheel tighter, her knuckles pale against the cracked leather, as the headlights carved two thin tunnels through the black. The hum of her aging SUV's tires was the only sound she'd heard for the last hour, apart from the occasional chirp of insects flinging themselves at the windshield and the low, uneasy hiss of the wind sneaking through the weathered window. Seals. Dryden had long disappeared behind her, swallowed by the night. The little West Texas town was nothing more than a few rusting signs and boarded-up gas stations now, a forgotten speck on the map. She'd planned to stop there for coffee. Maybe a stretch, but something about the place had unsettled her. The way the streetlights flickered like dying fireflies, the way the shadows seemed thicker than they should have been. So she'd kept going. Maybe that was her first mistake. The road ahead seemed endless. Flat, empty. No sign of life except for the occasional shredded tire on the shoulder or a jackrabbit darting into the scrub. Maria tried to shake off the gnawing unease in her chest. She was used to long drives, the price of living out in these wide open spaces. But tonight felt different. The highway felt like it didn't want her there. Her eyes burned from staring at the road, and she rubbed them with the heel of her hand. That's when she heard it, soft at first, barely there over the hum of the tires. A sound that didn't belong. A sound that froze the blood in her veins. A child, sobbing. Maria's heart stuttered. She shot a glance at the rearview mirror. The back seat was cloaked in shadow, but she could just make out the outlines of her son's empty booster seat. Her stomach dropped. The crying continued, a thin, broken wail that sounded so small, so scared, so real. She gripped the wheel so hard her fingers ached. No, she whispered to herself. No, no, no. She hadn't stopped. She hadn't picked anyone up. The doors had been locked since she left Alpine. She'd checked. She always checked. The sobbing grew louder. A hitching, desperate sound that filled the cabin, as if the child were crouched just behind her seat. Maria's breath came in shallow bursts. She felt the cold prickle of sweat at the base of her neck, trickling down her spine. She forced herself to glance again at the mirror. Nothing. Who's there? Her voice cracked. She hated how weak it sounded. Who? Who are you? The sobbing faltered, then stopped. The silence that followed was worse. The air in the SUV felt thick, suffocating, like she was breathing through wet cloth. She strained to listen, heart pounding in her ears. Then the humming started, a soft, tuneless little hum, like a child might make while playing with a doll, or rocking back and forth. The kind of sound that, on any other night, might have been sweet. But here now, on this dead stretch of highway, it was the sound of a nightmare taking shape. The hairs on her arms stood on end. The hum rose and fell, over and over, aimless and eerie. Maria's mind raced. She tried to think logically. Maybe she was so tired she was imagining it. Maybe the wind and the road noise were playing tricks on her. But no, this was real. This was inside the car. She risked a glance over her shoulder, her eyes darting to the dark back seat. Still empty. Or no. Was it? A shape, small, hunched. She blinked hard. The shape didn't go away. Without thinking, she slammed on the brakes. The SUV skidded to a stop on the shoulder, tires spitting gravel. The humming ceased. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the cooling engine. Maria fumbled for the dome light, flicking the switch with trembling fingers. The interior flooded with weak yellow light. The back seat was empty. No child. No shape. Just the booster seat and a pile of napkins from some long-forgotten drive-through, but the smell. A faint, sour odor like old milk and earth. Like something left too long in the sun. It hadn't been there before. Maria's heart was thudding so hard she thought it might crack a rib. She leaned forward, resting her forehead against the steering wheel, trying to catch her breath. This was crazy. She was losing it. Too many miles, not enough sleep. That's all. But when she straightened up and reached for the gear shift, she heard it again. The hum, closer now. Right behind her ear dot she froze. The world seemed to narrow to that single awful sound. Her hands trembled on the wheel. Slowly, so slowly, she turned her head, the dome light casting long, jittery shadows. Nothing. Just empty. Space. But the humming went on, soft and steady. She unlocked the door with a frantic thumb stab at the button, shoved it open, and stumbled out into the night. The desert air hit her like a slap, cool and dry. She spun, shining her phone's flashlight into the back seat, onto the floorboards, under the seats. Empty, empty, but she could still hear it, the humming. Not in the car. Everywhere. In the air itself. As if the night had taken up the tune. She backed away from the SUV, her breath fogging in the beam of her phone light. The humming was louder now, surrounding her, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. The sound made her skin crawl, made her want to scream, and then she saw them. Tiny footprints in the dust beside the road, leading away from the car. Bare feet, the prints of a small child, heading off into the black, toward the scrub and the endless desert beyond. Maria stood there, shaking, torn between running after whatever it was or getting in the car and driving until the sun came up. But before she could move, the humming shifted. It became words, soft, sweet, and horribly close. Mama. Don't leave me out here. Her blood turned to ice. She whipped around. The back door of the SUV stood wide open. She hadn't opened. She hadn't. The booster seat was no longer empty. Something sat there, small and still. A shape hunched in the shadows, head bowed, hair hanging over its face. Slowly, it lifted its head. Maria didn't want to see. She knew she didn't want to see, but she couldn't look away. The face was pale, bloated, as if it had been underwater. Too long. The eyes, oh God, the eyes, were black pits, empty and endless. Mud clung to the corners of its mouth, and when it smiled, she saw tiny, broken teeth dot the child. The thing began to hum again. And this time, Maria understood the tune. It was a lullaby. The one she used to sing to her son before the fever took him. The one she hadn't sung in years. The night swallowed her scream as the door swung shut, and the humming echoed across the empty highway long after the SUV's headlights winked out in the dark. FM 149 cuts through the thick pine woods of Montgomery County like a scar, narrow and black under the moonlight, the kind of road that seems to go on forever between walls of trees that lean in too close, too eager to swallow up whatever dares to pass. It was past midnight, and the air was heavy with a kind of summer humidity that clings to the skin like wet cloth. Joseph Tanner gripped the wheel of his old Dodge, the engine humming low, the headlights pushing back the dark just enough to see the cracked ribbon of asphalt ahead. His mind drifted as the miles slipped under his tires. He'd spent too long at the bar in Conroe, trying to drink down the week's failures, work troubles, bills piling up, the silence of his empty house. The road was quiet, no other cars in sight, just the chirring of crickets and the occasional distant hoot of an owl. Through his open window, that's when he saw her. She stood on the shoulder of the road, at the edge where the grass met the asphalt, her thumb out, pale in the beams of his headlights. A young woman, maybe in her 20s, wearing a thin white dress that clung to her in the damp night air. Her hair was long and dark, hanging weightily around her face, and she didn't move as the truck approached, didn't step back, didn't flinch at the roar of the tires on the road. Joseph slowed, against better judgment. He told himself it was just being polite, just doing what any decent man would do. Maybe she was stranded. Maybe she'd been out here for hours. FM 149 wasn't the kind of place you wanted to be caught walking alone at night. The stories about this stretch of highway had been around forever: accidents, disappearances, strange sightings. But stories were just that. Stories. He rolled to a stop, leaned over, and pushed the door open. Need a ride? She didn't say anything at first. Just looked at him, her eyes too wide, too dark in the night. And then she smiled, soft and small, and slid into the passenger seat. Her skin was cold when her bare arm brushed his, and he shivered despite the heat. "Thanks," she said, her voice barely louder than the night sounds outside. "It's a bad night to be walking." Joseph nodded, pulling the truck back onto the road. "Where you headed?" "Home," she said, but didn't offer more. He kept driving, sneaking glances at her when he thought she wasn't looking. She stared straight ahead, hands folded in her lap, that small smile still playing on her lips. The truck's cab filled, with the smell of the pines and something else, something faint and sour, like water that had gone stale. The kind of smell you'd find in an old house left empty too long. After a few minutes, he heard it. A soft sound like a chuckle. He glanced at her. She was still facing forward, but that smile was wider now, teeth just visible in the glow from femme to vintage glow. "The dash? You okay?" he asked, his voice a little too loud, trying to cut through the uneasy quiet. She didn't answer, but the soft laugh came again, just a breath of sound at first. Then it grew, rising, turning shrill, filling the small space of the truck cab until it echoed against the glass and the metal, until it made Joseph's skin crawl. It was a sound that didn't belong in the dark, a sound that made the hair on his arms stand on end. "Hey," he said, his voice tight, glancing over again. But the seat was empty. His heart lurched, his hands tightening on the wheel. His eyes flicked to the mirror, and that's when he saw her face filling the rear view. So close it seemed she might press right through the glass. Grinning, grinning. So wide it split her face, eyes wild and black, mouth stretched too far, teeth too many, too sharp. Her hair hung in wet ropes, her skin pale as bone in the dashboard's light. He jerked the wheel, the truck skidding toward the shoulder, tires spraying gravel. His heart pounded, breath coming in sharp gasps as he tried to keep control. The truck fishtailed, the pines looming closer, and then he slammed the brakes, the vehicle skidding to a stop just before the ditch. For a moment, the only sound was the ticking of the cooling engine, the hammering of his heart in his ears. He stared into the mirror, but she was gone. The back seat was empty. The road behind him stretched away, empty and dark. His hands trembled as he wiped sweat from his brow, trying to convince himself it was the whiskey, the late hour, his tired mind playing tricks. But the coldness in the cab lingered, and that faint sour smell hung in the air like a warning. He stayed there for what felt like forever, too afraid to move, too afraid to look around. Then, with shaking hands, he shifted into gear and eased the truck back onto the road. He kept his eyes forward, refusing to look into the mirror again, his knuckles white on the wheel. But as the miles crawled by, he thought he heard it soft. At first, almost hidden under the hum of the tires on the blacktop. A laugh, faint, but there, and growing louder. State Highway 21 between Caldwell and Crockett is one of those stretches of road that seems to go on forever, cutting through pine forests, rolling fields, and forgotten towns with nothing but boarded-up gas stations and rusted water towers. Folks who travel it at night say the darkness there feels thicker, heavier, like the trees pressing closer after sunset. Some won't drive it at all once the sun goes down. But Jimmy McLean didn't know that. He was just trying to make it to San Augustine before midnight, driving his old Ford pickup and cursing his GPS for leading him onto the lonely, narrow highway in the first place. The clock on the dash glowed. 11:27 p.m. The radio had gone to static miles ago, and Jimmy's cell signal was long gone. Outside, the world was nothing but blackness broken by the twin beams of his headlights. Every now and then, a set of glowing eyes, a deer, a coyote maybe, would flash from the trees, vanish just as quick. Jimmy rubbed his face, trying to shake the creeping sense that he was the only man left on Earth. That's when he saw it, the first time. A rider on a horse, crossing the road up ahead. Jimmy's foot instinctively eased onto the brake. The rider didn't look his way, didn't seem to notice the truck bearing down. Just a dark shape on a pale horse, moving slowly across the blacktop, disappearing into the trees on the other side. Jimmy blinked hard, leaned forward over the wheel, but by the time he reached the spot, there was nothing there. No sign of horse or man. No sound, no broken branches at the roadside. He muttered, "What the hell?" and kept driving. But 5 miles later, there it was again. The rider. This time, Jimmy got a clearer look. The horse was thinner than before, its ribs showing like a washboard beneath filthy white hair. The rider sat hunched in the saddle, his hat low over his face. The horse's head hung low too, and as it stepped onto the pavement, Jimmy saw the animal's eyes, empty, hollow sockets. The truck screeched to a stop, tires smoking on the cracked asphalt. Jimmy's heart raced as he stared at the rider crossing, slow and steady, disappearing once more into the trees. The hair on his arm stood up, and for the first time, he realized how quiet the night was. Too quiet. No crickets, no frogs, no night birds. Just the faint ticking of his engine cooling beneath the hood. Jimmy wiped sweat from his brow, even though the cab was cold. He told himself it was exhaustion, that he'd been on the road too long. He put the truck back in gear, forced himself to keep going. But the rider wasn't done with him. It happened again and again. Every few miles, the same scene played out. The horse, each time, looked closer to death, its skin hanging and loose. Folds, its hooves cracked and bleeding, its body barely able to support its own weight, and the rider. The rider was changing too. His hat had slipped back, and what Jimmy glimpsed beneath it didn't look human anymore. The face was pale and drawn, skin stretched tight over sharp bones, eyes sunken deep in their sockets. A grin, wide and ghastly, seemed frozen on his face, teeth yellow and broken. The last time, Jimmy saw the horse collapse as it reached the middle of the road. It fell with a sickening thud, legs folding beneath it, sides heaving. The rider didn't dismount, didn't move at all. The horse began to drag itself forward, hooves scraping on the asphalt, pulling the rider along with it. The man's body sagged in the saddle, arms hanging limp, head lolling. But still, impossibly, that grin was fixed on his face. As if he was enjoying the horror of it all, Jimmy screamed, slammed the truck into reverse, tires spinning as he backed. Down the highway, heart pounding so loud he could barely hear himself think. But no matter how far he backed up, the horse and rider stayed ahead of him, dragging forward, leaving a dark smear on the pavement where blood or something black and thick oozed from the horse's ruined hooves. Jimmy spun the wheel, tried to turn around, but the truck skidded off the road into a ditch. The engine stalled. The headlights flickered, went out, leaving him in pitch black, and then he heard it, the scrape of hooves. The wet dragging sound. Closer. He fumbled for his keys, trying to start the engine, but the starter only clicked uselessly. The battery was dead. In the darkness, Jimmy could feel the night pressing in on him, feel the weight of something terrible drawing near. He dared to look out the window, and in the faint moonlight breaking through the trees, he saw the rider standing beside the truck now. The horse collapsed and still behind him. The rider's face was nothing but bone, skin gone, eyes empty pits. That awful grin still stretching wide. He raised one bony hand, placed it on the hood of the truck, and leaned forward as if peering through the glass. Jimmy felt cold seep through the door, through his skin, into his bones. The rider's mouth opened, and though no sound came out, Jimmy understood. A single word burned into his mind like a brand: ride. The world spun. The truck, the road, the night, all of it seemed to melt away, and Jimmy was falling into darkness. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in the truck. He was in the saddle, the reins in his hands. The same broken, dying horse beneath him, its breath rattling, its body failing with every step, and ahead of him, always ahead, the highway stretched on, endless and empty, under a sky with no stars. And Jimmy rode. Cameron had been on the road since sunset, pushing his old Corolla harder than he should have. He had planned to reach his cousin's place in Freeport before dark, but as usual, work had held him up. Now it was well past midnight, and he found himself alone on a stretch of Highway 288 that seemed to stretch forever into the black Texas night. Rain had fallen earlier, the kind that came out of nowhere and left just as quickly, leaving the world. Drenched and glistening, his wipers smeared the last stubborn drops across the windshield. The sky above was clear now, but the moon was hidden behind thick clouds, and the stars felt too distant to matter. His GPS had glitched out almost an hour ago. The screen glowed faintly on the dash, frozen, useless. Cell service was gone too. He told himself it was just a dead zone, but the unease was starting to gnaw at him. On either side of the highway, small houses appeared now and then, single-story structures, most with porches sagging under the weight of age and neglect. Some had warm lights in the windows, but no movement, no cars parked in the driveways, no dogs barking. Just the same yellow glow, house after house, like they were set. Pieces on a stage. Cameron's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "This place is dead," he muttered. His own voice sounded strange in the silence of the car. The highway felt like it had no end. The same gentle curve. The same flickering streetlights spaced too far apart. The same patches of fog rising from the wet ground, ghost-like in his headlights. He checked the fuel gauge and cursed under his breath. Quarter tank. He hadn't seen a gas station in miles. He hadn't seen anything except those damned houses. That's when he spotted the sign, a battered green highway sign, leaning slightly, its paint peeling from age and rain. Last turnoff 1 mile, finally. Relief flooded him. He'd take the turnoff, find a gas station, maybe a diner. Somewhere with people, with light, with noise. But as he neared the sign, his headlights picked out a shape on the shoulder of the road. A man. A man in an old raincoat, dark and stained. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed his face. He stood perfectly still, holding a rusty gas can in one hand. Cameron eased his foot off the gas. His instincts screamed at him to keep going, but his mind argued. Maybe the guy was stranded. Maybe he needed help, but the man didn't move, didn't wave, didn't step forward. Just stood there, staring. The gas can dangled from his hand, like dead weight. Cameron's skin crawled. He pressed the gas, speeding past. He glanced in the mirror, but the man was gone. The shoulder of the road was empty, slick with rain, as if the figure had never been there. Cameron's heart pounded. His mouth was dry. He told himself he was tired. Seeing things. The turnoff came into view, a narrow exit ramp that curved off into the dark. He took it without thinking, eager to leave the endless highway behind. But the turnoff didn't lead to a gas station. or a town that had curved back, looping around like a snake, merging him right back onto the same highway, same houses, same oak trees, same dented mailboxes. Cameron felt cold all over. His headlights lit up the highway ahead, and there he was again. The man with the gas can. Closer this time. Almost in the middle of the road, Cameron swerved, tires hissing on the wet asphalt. His car shuddered as it hit the shoulder, gravel spraying. When he righted the wheel and looked back, the man was gone. Again. The gaslight blinked on. No, Cameron whispered. No, no, no. The highway stretched ahead, empty except for the scattered houses. The same houses, over and over like he was trapped in a loop. Each house identical, the same porch swaying. Gently. The same warm window lights that revealed nothing behind the glass. He drove faster, the engine whining. The highway sign came into view again. Last turnoff 1 mile. His hand shook. His mind raced. He didn't remember passing that sign again. He didn't remember anything changing at all. And then his radio crackled, dead static filling the car. Out of the static came a voice. Thin, distant, whispering. Don't stop. Cameron turned the radio off, but the static kept coming. From where? The speakers were silent. The sound filled the car anyway, like the night itself was speaking to him. Don't stop, keep driving. But the gas gauge was on empty now. The car began to stutter, the engine gasping. Up ahead, the man stood waiting. Right in the center of the road, Cameron's headlights caught his face this time, pale, hollow, eyes black as the night around him. A grin that stretched too wide, revealing teeth that looked more like broken glass than bone. The car sputtered, slowed, stopped. Cameron single quotes S breath fogged the windshield. He locked the doors, fumbled with his phone, knowing it was useless. Outside, the man began to walk toward the car, slow, steady. The gas can swung in his hand. Metal scraping against the road. Don't stop. The voice hissed in his head, louder now. As if it was inside the car with him, Cameron closed his eyes. When he opened them, the man was at the driver's side window. That grin. That impossible. Grin. The man raised the gas can, tipped it toward the car. The smell of gasoline filled Cameron's nose. The last thing he saw was the flick of a match, the spark catching the gasoline-soaked road. The flames raced toward the car, faster than he could scream. It started just past 9 o'clock, with the kind of Texas dusk that soaks the land in bruised purple and orange, the air thick with the scent of dust and dying heat. Shelley wasn't supposed to be out this late. She'd stayed too long at her friend's house in Keller, a few too many glasses of wine, too much talking about the divorce she didn't want to talk about. When she finally climbed into her old Honda Civic and pulled onto FM 1709, she felt that familiar loneliness settle in. The highway stretched ahead, black as sin, the faded stripes barely visible under the weak glow of her headlights. She kept the radio low, more for company than anything else. Some late-night DJ mumbling about classic rock, the signal crackling now and then. The road was empty, the way it gets out there between towns, where the night feels wider than it should and the dark seems to swallow the world whole. Shelley was maybe 15 miles from home when she first saw the lights in her rear view. 2 of them, blue, not the bright flash of a cop's strobes, but steady, almost gentle. At first, she thought maybe someone had their high beams on, maybe a motorcycle or one of those tricked-out trucks the local boys like to roar around in. But they were too close together for that. Too close to each other, too low to the ground. And they didn't flicker when the road curved, didn't bounce when the asphalt turned rough. They just floated there. Following. She glanced down at the speedometer. 50, 55. The Civic wasn't what it used to be, but it could handle that. She pressed the pedal a little harder, just enough to see if the lights would drop back, if whoever was behind her would take the hint. But they didn't. They stayed right where they were, matching her pace exactly. No engine noise. No tire. Whine on the cracked old road. Just those two blue lights hanging in the dark like eyes. A cold sweat started at the back of her neck, despite the heat that still clung to the night. Shelley shook her head, tried to laugh it off. Maybe it was a reflection from what she didn't know. Maybe the wine was playing tricks on her. But the lights were real enough, and they weren't falling back. If anything, they were drawing closer. The road ahead narrowed where FM 1709 hugged the edge of an old dry creek bed. She knew it well, drove it every day. No shoulder here. No place to pull off. The barbed wire fence on one side, a drop-off on the other. The lights came on faster now, closing the distance between them in a way that made her stomach knot up tight. She felt the urge to hit the brakes, to make them stop, to force whoever it was to show themselves. But instinct told her that would be a mistake. Instead, she gripped the wheel, knuckles white, eyes flicking between the road and the mirror, and then the light surged forward. Shelley cried out, a choked little sound that barely made it past her lips as the blue orbs, they were orbs, not headlights, not anything mechanical, came up behind her bumper, so close she should have felt the impact. But there was nothing, just light. Blue light, cold and sharp, pouring in through the back window, filling the car, making her skin prickle and her heart hammer against her ribs. Had to stop. She had to get out. She couldn't think, couldn't breathe. The curve ahead offered a small dirt turnout, more a patch of worn-down grass than anything official, and she jerked the wheel toward it, tires skidding in the loose gravel as she brought the car to a shuddering stop. For a second, just a second, she thought the lights would stop too. That whatever they were, they would follow the rules of the living, of metal and rubber and weight. But they didn't. The orbs kept coming. No sound, no slowing. They passed through the back of her car as if it wasn't there, passed through. Her seat passed through her dot, and when they did, it felt like death itself. A searing cold that wasn't just on her skin but in her, curling into her lungs, freezing the blood in her veins. She gasped, a desperate raw pull for air that wouldn't come. Her heart clenched so tight she thought it would burst or stop or both. The blue light filled her vision, filled her mind, and for one terrible instant, she felt everything. Every loss, every regret, every lonely night crashed down on her at once, as if the lights weren't just things but memories grief made. Real, made flesh, made light, and then they were gone. Shelley slumped forward, forehead against the steering wheel, breath coming in shallow, ragged gulps. The night was dark again, silent, the kind of silence that hums in your ears because there's nothing else to hear. She sat like that for a long time, too afraid to move, too afraid to look in the mirror. The Civic's engine ticked as it cooled. The only sound on the whole godforsaken stretch of highway. Eventually, when the trembling in her hands eased enough to grip the wheel, she started the car. The engine coughed, then caught. Headlights carved a narrow tunnel through the dark. She pulled back onto the road, driving slow now, slower than she'd ever driven this way. Every so often she glanced in the mirror, expecting, dreading, to see those lights again, but the road behind her stayed empty. She made it home just before midnight, parking in the driveway like she always did, hands still shaking, heart still aching with that deep, icy terror that wouldn't quite let go. The porch light was on. She must have left it that way when she left earlier, and for a moment, just a moment, it seemed to glow blue. That was months ago. Shelley doesn't drive at night anymore. She says it's because of her eyes, or because she's trying to be careful, but I know the truth. And if you ever find yourself on FM 1709 after dark and you see those lights, don't stop. Don't look back. Just keep driving, no matter how fast they come at you. Because when they pass through you, you don't come out the same. Some part of you stays on that road, and that night, frozen in the blue. Forever. The fog had come in heavy that night, the kind that didn't just sit on the ground but seemed to crawl toward you, swallow you whole. It rolled over the East Texas pines along US 69, a gray tide that lapped at the narrow two-lane road like something alive. Jimmy Wilcox squinted through his windshield, wipers squeaking uselessly against the damp glass. His headlights barely pierced 20 feet ahead. He hated driving at night. Hated it more when the world felt like it had been erased, replaced by this endless, shifting wall of mist. He was dead tired. He hadn't planned to be on the road this late, but the job down in Lufkin had gone long. The foreman promised overtime pay, and Jimmy, broke as hell and behind on rent, couldn't say no. So here he was, crawling up US 69, trying to make it. Back to Jacksonville, the fog turning every mile into an eternity. Then he saw them, shapes at first. Just shadows in the fog, small, thin, standing at the edge of the road. As he got closer, they became figures, children. 2 of them. Maybe 3. They were waving their arms, frantic. The beam of his headlights caught pale faces, wide eyes. A girl, maybe 10, with long stringy hair. A boy younger, maybe 7, mouth open like he was screaming, but Jimmy couldn't hear anything over the hum of his engine and the rattle of his old truck. His heart jumped into his throat. What the hell were kids doing out here this late? Out here miles from any town? He eased his foot onto the brake, the tires crunching gravel as he pulled onto the shoulder. The fog pressed in thicker, muffling the world. His truck's hazard lights clicked on, the red flashes swallowed up almost immediately by the mist. Jimmy killed the engine. The silence was thick as the fog now. He could hear his own breathing, too loud in the cab. He grabbed his flashlight. From the glove box, swung the door open, and stepped out. "Hey," he called, voice tight with worry. "You kids okay? Are you hurt?" The girl stepped forward out of the fog. She wore a thin, white dress that looked soaked through. Her skin was pale, too pale, almost bluish. The boy was right behind her, and now Jimmy saw a third child, another girl, standing a little off to the side. The boy's arms kept waving, beckoning him, as if urging him to hurry. Jimmy's boots crunched on the gravel shoulder as he took a few steps toward them. The fog felt cold against his skin, wetting his hair, seeping into his clothes. "What are you doing out here?" he asked, scanning the road for wreckage, a car in a ditch, anything that would explain this. The girl didn't answer. She just stared at him with eyes that seemed too large, too dark. The boy kept waving. Jimmy felt a tug in his gut, that instinct that something wasn't right, but they were kids. Out here alone. Maybe they'd been in a wreck. Maybe their folks were hurt somewhere in the fog. "You hurt? Where's your mama and daddy?" The girl took another step forward, then another. Close enough now that he could see her lips moving. But the sound was wrong. A whisper that didn't match the shape of her mouth, like wind moving through dead leaves. The boy's mouth was still open wide, but no sound came out at all. His arms dropped to his sides, his head tilted, and he just stared. Jimmy's skin prickled. His breath fogged the air in front of him, and the light of his flashlight glinted off the moisture in the air. The girl reached out a small hand. "You? Need help?" Jimmy asked, voice shaking. She nodded, slow, deliberate, and then moved. All of them. At once. The boy, the second girl, the first one right in front of him. Their faces shifted, smiles that weren't smiles. Too wide. too hungry. They surged toward him, hands outstretched, little fingers cold as ice. Jimmy staggered back, but it was too late. The girl's hand closed around his wrist, and the cold shot up his arm like a jolt of electricity. His flashlight hit the ground, beam spinning wildly. "Let go! What the hell? Let go of me!" But they didn't. They swarmed him, hands grabbing. His coat, his arms, his legs. Their skin was clammy, and the cold went deep, deeper than flesh, straight into his bones. He tried to jerk free, stumbled backward, but they were strong, stronger than they should have been. Stronger than children. Had any right to be. The fog thickened, swirling around them, and Jimmy felt himself being pulled forward, off the shoulder, into the mist. His boots skidded, caught on something roots? Rocks? No, hands. There were more of them. Small hands in the fog. Clutching, grasping. Dozens of them. He screamed then, raw and panicked, but the fog swallowed the sound. He thought of his mother, his little sister back home, of the girl he'd meant to call and hadn't. He thought of Jacksonville, of his empty apartment, of the paycheck in his pocket. None of it mattered now. The cold was everywhere, inside him, dragging him down, and then he was gone. The flashlight lay abandoned on the side of the road, its beam dying as the batteries drained. The hazard lights on the truck blinked red, slow, and steady, like a heartbeat fading away. The fog rolled on, swallowing the truck, the road. Everything died, and if you drove that stretch of US 69 on a foggy night, if you were unlucky enough, you might see them. The children in the mist, waving, waiting, hungry. The night was moonless, the kind of pitch black that swallowed up everything beyond the reach of the truck's high beams. Luke Hadley had been running hauls down FM 666 for over 15 years, but tonight, something about the road felt different. The air was heavy, thick like soup, and his headlights barely cut through the murk. The highway stretched out ahead of him, two narrow lanes of cracked asphalt flanked by endless stretches of scrub and shadow. Every mile marker he passed seemed the same, as if the road was looping on itself. He hadn't seen another car in over an hour, and his CB was dead quiet. No chatter, no warnings. Just silence, thick and oppressive, like the highway itself was holding its breath. Then he saw the glow dot at first. It was faint, just a flicker of orange on the horizon, like someone's campfire off in the brush. But as he got closer, it grew brighter, until the light painted the fog in flickering shades of fire. His pulse quickened. The glow was right on the shoulder, just ahead. He eased up on the gas, the rig hissing as it slowed, tires crunching on. Loose gravel. That's when he saw the man, or what was left of one. He stood right at the edge of the shoulder, a blackened figure wreathed in smoke. His skin, if you could call it that, was charred and cracked, like overcooked meat left too long on the grill. His clothes hung in tatters, scorched to rags, and his eyes. His eyes glowed faintly red in the dark, twin coals burning from the wreckage of his face. Luke froze, foot hovering over the brake. The burnt man raised one arm, slow and deliberate, and pointed down the highway. Luke felt his throat go dry. Every instinct screamed at him to hit the gas, to get the hell out of there. But his hands moved like they weren't his own, guiding. The truck forward, creeping past the figure dot as he passed, the heat hit him. The air inside the cab turned stifling, and the smell of smoke and char filled his nose, so thick he gagged. He glanced into the side mirror, heart hammering, expecting the figure to fade into the fog behind him. But the burnt man was following, not walking, gliding. His feet didn't seem to touch the ground, and the glow that surrounded him was spreading. The brush along the roadside flickering to life, small flames dancing along the dry grass. Luke slammed the pedal down, engine roaring as he tried to outrun the nightmare. The rig thundered down the highway, tires screaming on the cracked pavement. But no matter how fast he went, the glow stayed just behind him, lighting up the road like a moving inferno. Mile after mile, he pushed the truck harder than he ever had, sweat pouring down his face, eyes locked on the mirror. And finally, as he crested a hill and the first pale light of dawn broke over the horizon, the glow vanished. The heat faded. The smell of smoke drifted away on the breeze. Luke didn't stop driving until he hit the next town, hands trembling so hard he could barely park the truck. When he finally worked up the nerve to check the back of his rig, his knees nearly gave out. The paint on the trailer was scorched black, the metal warped with heat, and burned into the steel, clear as day, was the outline of a handprint. The hand of the burnt man of FM 666, the one who still waits on that dark stretch of Texas road, searching for the next poor soul who'll stop and see him. They were laughing as they left the diner, their hands clasped like they were the only two people in the world. Hannah's dark hair spilled over her shoulders as she leaned against Mark, the late-night breeze from the fields outside Navasota, teasing the hem of her dress. It was after midnight, and Highway 6 was empty except for their headlights and the endless stretch of blacktop that led toward home. Mark fumbled for the radio, turning the dial until he found some scratchy country song, and they rolled down the windows to let the warm Texas night seep in. It felt good, simple, clean, the kind of moment you want to fold up and keep safe forever. They didn't see the black sedan at first. Not until it appeared behind them, its headlights flaring in the rear view like the eyes of something mean and patient. Mark noticed it about 10 miles past the outskirts of town. The car kept its distance at first, hanging back like it was just another driver heading home on the lonely highway. But after a few miles, when the road narrowed and the trees crowded close on either side, it crept up behind them. Too close. Uncomfortably close. "You see that?" Mark said, glancing at the mirror. His voice had an edge now, that joking tone. "Gone. Yeah," Hannah said. She turned in her seat, peering back at the gleaming grille, the shape of the car mostly swallowed by the dark. "Why's he so close?" Mark didn't answer. He sped up, but the sedan matched him, its headlights steady, unwavering. The air in the car seemed thicker suddenly, the night no longer gentle but pressing, smothering. The road curved, and Mark took it faster than he should have, tires humming against the asphalt. The sedan stayed right with him. "Maybe it's some jerk trying to scare us," Hannah said, though her voice was thinner now. "Kids messing around." Mark gritted his teeth. He flicked off the radio, needing to think, needing to hear the engine, the tires, the world outside. But as soon as the music died, the radio crackled faint at first, like the hiss of a snake under the dash. Then louder, filling the car with static that rose and fell like breathing. Mark reached to shut it off completely, but before he could, a voice slithered out of the noise. A voice that wasn't from any station, wasn't from any place that made sense. Mark. Hannah. Both of them froze, eyes wide, hearts thudding. The voice was soft, almost kind, but it felt wrong. Like it knew them. Like it had always known them. Then came the part that chilled them deeper than anything. And little Emily. Hannah's hands flew to her stomach. 16 weeks along, and they hadn't told anyone the name they'd picked. Not their parents, not their friends. Just the two of them, late at night, whispering in the dark. Emily, their secret. Mark slammed his palm against the radio. But the voice kept on, whispering their names over and over, like a chant, like a promise. The sedan roared past them then, pulling alongside for a moment. Mark caught a glimpse of it, A shape more than a car, deep black, paint that didn't reflect the moon or the stars. No driver, at least none he could see. The windows were dark, as if they'd been painted over or as if the night itself had filled them. The car surged ahead, cutting back into their lane so sharply Mark had to swerve to keep from hitting it. The tires skidded, gravel spraying from the shoulder as the radio went dead, just dead, not even static anymore. Silence filled the car, heavy as lead. Mark slowed, heart pounding, and watched as the sedan vanished down the highway, its taillights small red pinpricks swallowed by the typhus. Dark. They drove the rest of the way home in that awful silence, afraid to turn the radio back on, afraid of what they might hear. The night seemed to watch them now, the trees leaning closer, the shadows deeper. At home, Mark double-checked every lock, pulled the curtains tight. Hannah sat on the edge of the bed, her hand still resting protectively over her belly, staring at nothing. They didn't sleep. Not really. Every sound outside made them flinch, the creak of a branch, the wind against the house, the groan of the old porch boards. Morning brought no relief. The sun felt cold. The world felt wrong. They tried to shake it off. Days passed. Weeks. But things changed. The radio in the truck would sometimes burst into static, just for a second, whenever they drove down that stretch of Highway 6. Sometimes at home, late at night, they'd hear it again, a faint whisper of their names through the baby monitor, though Emily wasn't even born yet. The voice was patient. It waited. And they started seeing it. Not every night, not every week, but often enough. The black sedan parked at the edge of their street, or idling at the far end of the grocery store lot. No plates, no driver. Always. Gone if they tried to approach. Emily was born in the fall. They didn't name her Emily. They couldn't. They chose a different name, something no one could guess, something they hadn't spoken aloud until the moment she arrived. But that didn't change anything, because sometimes, in the dark, when the world was quiet, they'd hear it again. That soft, knowing voice seeping through the walls, through the speakers, through the air itself. Emily. It would whisper. Emily. And they knew that wherever that black sedan had come from, it was still out there, waiting, watching, and it would always know. The night was thick and heavy with the scent of cedar and gasoline as Cole Vickers tore down FM 969, the narrow two-lane strip that snaked through the dark heart of Bastrop County. His Harley's engine thundered beneath him, the chrome beast, vibrating through his bones like a war drum, the wind clawing at his jacket and tearing through his hair. The moon was a ghost behind a haze of low clouds, spilling pale light over the desolate road that stretched out before him like a black ribbon through the woods. He was alone out here. Or at least, that's what he told himself. Cole had been. Running since sundown. Running from what? He couldn't quite say, just the kind of restlessness that settled deep in his chest and made the walls of his trailer feel like they were closing in. He figured a midnight ride might shake it loose. FM 969 was familiar, comforting in its way, a road he knew blindfolded from years of riding. But tonight, it felt different. The shadows were deeper, the silence thicker. The road felt ... watched. It started as a hum beneath the roar of his engine, like another motor joining him on the night highway. Cole glanced at his mirrors, but the red glow of his taillight revealed nothing but endless black. Probably nothing. His ears playing tricks on him, that was all. He twisted the throttle harder, the Harley snarling as it surged forward, eating up the miles. But the hum didn't fade. It grew louder, closer. A glimmer of motion in the corner of his eye made him cut a glance over his shoulder. That was when he saw a rider, maybe 30 yards back, astride a massive black horse that pounded the asphalt as if it were dirt. The figure was clad in ragged leathers, dark as pitch, the horse's eyes glowing like coals. But it wasn't the beast or the rider's strange dress that made Cole's blood run cold. It was the empty space above the man's shoulders. No head. Just the jagged stump of a neck, dark with what looked like dried blood. And in one gaunted hand, the rider held high a massive axe, its blade glinting weightly in the moonlight. Cole's heart slammed against his ribs. What the hell was he seeing? A prank? Some psycho? His pulse hammered in his throat as he faced forward again and gunned it, the Harley screaming beneath him. The trees blurred past, their twisted shapes reaching for him like claws. But no matter how fast he went, the sound of hooves kept pace. The drumming of the horse's steps grew louder, closer. He risked another look. The rider had halved the distance between them. The axe was raised higher now, ready to fall. Cole swore under his breath, sweat stinging his eyes despite the cool night air. He swerved hard around a bend, tires skidding, praying the thing couldn't follow at that speed. But as he straightened out, there it was again, closing the gap. The rider didn't seem to slow, didn't seem to falter. The horse's hooves struck sparks from the pavement with each step, and now Cole could hear the ragged breath of the animal. Or was that the breath of the headless man himself? Mile markers flew past in a blur. Cole tried to think, tried to reason with himself. It had to be a hallucination. Maybe he'd been on the road too long, maybe the beers he'd had before leaving were messing with him. But every time he dared glance back, that nightmare shape loomed closer, the axe poised to split him in two. The stump of the rider's neck seemed to weep black ichor that dripped onto his mount's mane, steaming as it hit the hide. The road narrowed through a tunnel of trees, branches scraping at Cole's shoulders as he pushed the Harley to its limits. The smell of wood smoke filled the air, or maybe that was just the reek of his own fear. He couldn't outrun it. He felt it now in his bones, a deep certainty that this was it, that whatever chased him had done so before and would again. And there was no escape. The axe wasn't just meant for him. It was a summons. The headlights caught a curve too late. The road twisted sharply, and Cole's front tire hit gravel at the edge of the asphalt. The bike bucked beneath him, and for a breathless second, he thought to bring it back, his heart a hammer of panic. But the rear wheel slid, traction lost, and the Harley spun out. Cole felt himself lifted into the air, weightless, before the world slammed him down hard. His shoulder cracked against a stump, pain flashing white behind his eyes. The bike tumbled into the ditch, metal shrieking, then fell silent. Everything was still. The only sound was his own ragged breathing, the hiss of a punctured tire deflating. And then the hoofbeats, steady and slow, drawing up beside him. Cole tried to crawl, but his limbs felt like water, his head swimming. The rider dismounted, the sound of boots on gravel loud in the quiet. Cole raised his eyes just in time to see the axe come down, the blade catching the moonlight one last time. The road was empty by dawn. No sign of the crash, no scar on the bark of the trees. Just the whisper of the wind through the pines, and the faintest imprint of hooves on the shoulder of FM 969. But sometimes, on nights when the clouds cover the moon and the air smells of smoke and blood drivers swear they see two riders now. Two dark shapes racing the highway, headless, their axes raised high, hunting for the next soul to join their cursed ride. State Highway 108 cuts through the emptiest stretches of West Texas, where the land folds into hills of rock and scrub, and the sky swallows everything whole. In the heat of the day, the air ripples over the cracked asphalt, and at night, the blackness feels heavy enough to press down on your chest. Dean Harmon had driven that highway dozens of times, but that night somewhere south of Alpine, heading toward Terlingua, he felt like he'd left the world behind entirely. He was alone. As usual. He liked it that way. Or at least, that's what he always told himself. After the divorce, after the job he hated ended with him tossing a badge on the boss's desk, Dean found peace in the middle of nowhere. That's what brought him out here. The hiking, the silence, the way the desert had a way of making your problems feel small. But on that night, the desert didn't feel peaceful. It felt wrong. His truck had started making a sound an hour before a hollow clunk that came and went, like it couldn't make up its mind. Then the temperature gauge crept up higher and higher until steam hissed from under the hood. Dean pulled over onto the crumbling shoulder, killed the engine, and stepped out into the night. The moon was a sliver behind the clouds, not enough to light his way. The wind had died, leaving only the ticking of the cooling engine and the soft rustle of unseen things in the brush. Dean grabbed a flashlight from the glove box and popped the hood. Radiator hose split right down the middle. He swore under his breath, wiped sweat from his brow, and tried his phone. No signal. Not even a flicker. Dean stared down the empty highway in both directions. No headlights. No distant rumble of an engine. He hadn't seen another car for miles before the truck died, and he figured it could be hours before anyone else came along. He had water, some food, and he could wait it out till morning. But as he turned to climb back into the cab, that's when he saw it. A light. Faint, yellow, bobbing out in the scrubland beyond the road. A lantern, maybe 50 yards away, moving slow, as if carried by someone walking the uneven ground. Dean hesitated. His first thought was relief. Someone was out there, maybe a rancher, maybe someone who lived off the grid and could help him. But then he wondered what the hell anyone would be doing out there at this hour. He called out, his voice cracking in the stillness. "Hey, over here." The light didn't stop. It kept moving, weaving between the mesquite and the low rocks. He grabbed his pack, slung it over one shoulder, and crossed the road, pushing through. The brush and the direction of the glow. The dry branches scratched at his arms, and the ground sloped downward as he walked, the air seeming to grow colder the further he went. The light stayed ahead of him, never getting closer, never falling. Behind. He tried calling out again, louder this time, but his voice felt swallowed by the dark. The ground grew rockier, and soon he saw the outline of a ridge rising ahead. The light disappeared behind it, and by the time he reached the top, he saw it below at the mouth of what looked like an old mine. The entrance yawned open, blacker than the night around it. The light flickered near the opening, and now Dean could see the figure carrying it. A man short-stooped with a wide-brimmed hat pulled low. He wore what looked like old clothes, suspenders, a filthy shirt, heavy boots. The miner. Dean opened his mouth, but the man turned and stepped into the mine. The light went with him, swallowed by the dark. Dean stood there a long moment, heart hammering. Every instinct screamed at him to turn around, to go back to the truck, and lock the doors. But something else, a pull he couldn't explain, pushed him forward. Maybe it was desperation, maybe curiosity. Maybe it was the sense that the man hadn't led him out here by accident. He switched on his flashlight and stepped inside. The beam cut through the black, but barely. The air in the mine was cold, so cold it felt like stepping into a freezer. His breath came out in puffs, and the walls seemed to drink up the light, the rock damp and dark. He moved deeper, calling out for the miner, but his voice echoed strangely, like the mine was bigger on the inside than it had any right to be. And then his flashlight died. Just like that. 1 second the beam was there. The next, he was standing, in perfect darkness. Dean smacked the side of the light, shook it, unscrewed the cap, and checked the batteries by feel. Everything seemed fine, but it wouldn't turn back on. His skin crawled. He turned, meaning to head back out, but he couldn't see anything. Not a faint glow from the entrance, not the miner's lantern, not his own hand in front of his face. It was as if the mine had swallowed the world. He took a step, then another, trying to keep his panic in check. His boots scraped rock, sent pebbles skittering into the dark, and then he heard it. Breathing, slow, ragged, coming from deep inside the mine. Dean froze. The sound didn't stop. It grew louder, closer. He opened his mouth to speak, but the words died in his throat. The air smelled wrong, now wet earth and rot, like something had died down here a long time ago and was still rotting in the cold. The breathing turned to a low moan, then a whispering, the words too faint to understand. Dean turned and ran, arms outstretched, scraping along the walls to keep his bearings. The mine seemed to twist and stretch, the walls closing in and pulling. Away at random dot he stumbled, fell hard on the stone, and lay there, gasping. The whispering was all around him now, voices layered on voices, some laughing, some crying. And beneath it all, that breathing. As steady as the beating of a drum, a hand touched his ankle. Dean kicked out, scrambled to his feet, and ran again. He didn't care which way, didn't care what waited in the dark, anything was better than whatever had touched him. His hands found empty air, and suddenly he was falling, tumbling down a steep shaft, the rock tearing at his skin. When he came to, he was lying at the bottom of a pit. The whispering was gone, the breathing too. Only silence remained, and the dark, thick, endless dark. He lay there a long time. Too long. When he tried to stand, his leg wouldn't hold him. Broken, maybe. The cold seeped into his bones, and then, far above, he saw it. A faint light. The miner's lantern, high at the edge of the pit, as if the man had been watching him all along. Dean tried to shout, but no sound came. The light bobbed once, twice, and then it was gone, leaving him alone, buried alive in the mine that no light could touch. Out on State Highway 118, Dean's truck sat quiet and empty, the desert wind rising again to carry the night away. The stretch of Highway 180 between Snyder and Gale was the kind of empty that made your ears ring. Miles of nothing but brittle grass, barbed wire, and wind-battered mesquite trees under a black sky. The stars out there seemed sharper, colder. Somehow, as if they didn't belong to the same world you woke up in. Travis Collier had been driving that road since dusk, hauling the bed of his beat-up Dodge Ram full of deer meat, the spoils of a long, lonely weekend at his lease. He wasn't in any hurry to get back. The beer in his cooler was still cold, and he liked the way the road hummed beneath his tires. The radio had long since given up a signal, leaving him with nothing but the creak of the truck and the occasional pop of the cooling engine. When he stopped to piss, it was near midnight when he first saw them, the eyes. 2 red dots, low too. The ground at first, glimmering in the high beams like hot coals. They flickered across the highway, from the scrub on one side to the shoulder on the other. Travis squinted, slowed down. What the hell? A coyote, maybe, or a wild dog. But there was something off about the way those eyes moved. Too smooth, too steady, and too big. They weren't the jittery, nervous eyes of a scavenger crossing a road. They had purpose. They glided across the asphalt like they owned it. Travis eased his foot off the gas. The truck coasted to a stop, tires crunching against gravel at the edge of the highway. The eyes had stopped too, just at the edge of the beams where the light thinned into the dark. He sat there, engine idling, staring out into the night. The eyes stared back. No shape, no body he could make out. Just those 2 red glints hanging in the black. A minute passed, maybe 2. The kind of silence that makes your skin itch. Travis killed the engine. The night swallowed him whole. No hum of tires, no fan whirring, no nothing. Just the soft breath of the wind through the grass, and still those eyes burned. He grabbed his rifle off the rack, slid out of the cab. The door creaked too loud in the quiet. He stood there, boots on the cracked shoulder, the barrel resting on the truck bed. "Get," he barked, voice too thin against the dark. "Go on now." The eyes didn't flinch. He felt it then, that wrongness. The kind of wrong that curls around your gut and makes you wish you'd kept driving. The air felt thicker, heavy like storm weather, but the sky was clear. The stars hadn't moved. The wind had died. The eyes blinked, slow, like whatever it wasn't in any kind of hurry. Travis flicked the safety off the rifle, brought it up to his shoulder. He peered down the sights, tried to pin down the shape, but the thing was too far back in the dark, beyond where the light reached. The eyes floated there, maybe 3 feet off the ground, maybe 4. He couldn't tell. Couldn't tell much of anything, except that they were watching. He thought about firing a warning shot, but something in him said no, said that'd be the mistake. That if he fired, those eyes might come at him, might close that stretch of dark. Between them, faster than he could think, a sound came then. A soft scrape, like claws on rock. From the other side of the road, down in the ditch. Another pair of eyes lit up, red like the first dot, then another, and another. 4 sets now. All low, all watching. No movement except for that one slow blink every so often, like they knew how to be patient. Travis backed toward the truck, heart thudding. The gravel slipped under his boots. He kept the rifle up, finger light on the trigger. Then the smell hit. Him, coppery, wet like blood gone old. And under that, something worse. A rot, like something had been dead out there a long time. He reached for the door handle, kept his eyes on the red dots. The handle felt cold, slick with dew maybe, or maybe it was just the sweat on his palm. He yanked it open, slid back into the cab, locked the doors. The eyes stayed where they were. For a second, he thought maybe that was it. Maybe they were just curious, whatever they were. Maybe if he started the engine, they'd scatter like animals do when the noise comes back. But when the truck rumbled to life, the eyes didn't move. Instead, they began to spread out, slow, deliberate, like a line being drawn across the highway. One by one, more pairs appeared, until it looked like the whole goddamn ditch on either side of him was lined with those red points. Travis slammed it into drive. The tires spit gravel as he tore back. Onto the blacktop, heart hammering, breath coming in shallow gasps. The truck rocked as it hit a pothole, but he didn't let up, didn't look back. Not at first, not after a mile, maybe 2. He glanced in the rear view. Nothing but night, no eyes, no shapes, but he didn't slow down. Not until the glow of town showed. On the horizon, faint but enough to break the grip of whatever the hell that had been. When he pulled into Gale, he stopped at the lone gas station, empty at this hour but lit up like a beacon. He sat there in the parking lot, hands shaking on the wheel, the engine ticking as it cooled dot, and when he closed his eyes, all he could see were those red points in the dark. Waiting dot, watching dot, and somehow he knew he hadn't seen the last of them. The night was thick and heavy over the endless stretch of I-35, the kind of night that swallowed the world whole, leaving nothing but the hum of tires on asphalt and the occasional flicker of headlights in the rearview mirror. Gary Sanders gripped the wheel of his aging Chevy pickup tighter, leaning forward as if that would help him see through the black curtain draped across the Texas highway. He'd been driving since dusk, trying to make it from San Antonio to Dallas without stopping. But now the fatigue was setting in hard, a dull ache behind his eyes, a leaden weight in his limbs. The radio played low, static mixing with some old country tune that didn't quite reach his brain. He checked the clock on the dash. 1:42 a.m. The highway was dead at this hour. Just him, the road, and the dark. Until it wasn't. The fire appeared. Like a punch to the gut, sudden, shocking, and bright enough to blind him. Flames leapt into the air on the shoulder ahead, licking at the night sky, casting everything in hellish orange light. Gary's heart slammed against his ribs. He saw the twisted wreckage of a sedan, its front crumpled against the guardrail, smoke billowing, glass glittering on the pavement like spilled diamonds. A woman's voice screamed, high, desperate, ragged with terror. Jesus! Gary yanked. The wheel, tires shrieking as he swerved, the truck fishtailing dangerously close to the ditch. His headlights swept the scene, the burning car, the figure of a man crawling away, the flash of something white that might have been the woman. Then the truck hit gravel and lurched. He fought it back onto the shoulder, heart pounding, eyes wide. He slammed on the brakes and skidded to a stop. For a second, he just sat there, breathing hard, trying to make sense of what he'd seen. Smoke stung his nostrils. The smell of burning rubber and gasoline filled the cab. Gary flung open the door and jumped out. "Hey, are you okay?" he shouted, sprinting back down the shoulder, boots crunching the gravel. But there was nothing. No fire, no wreckage, no man crawling for help, no woman screaming, just empty road, a cracked and battered guardrail, and the endless dark beyond. Gary stood there, breathing hard, confusion crashing over him like a wave. His eyes darted everywhere, searching for any sign that he hadn't imagined it. He could still smell the smoke, or thought he could, but the night air was clean, carrying only the faint scent of sage and dust. What the hell? He muttered. He rubbed at his eyes as if that would clear the vision from his mind. Maybe he'd nodded off for a second, dreamed the whole thing. But it had felt real. Too real. He turned to head back to the truck, but something wasn't right. The highway was gone. His breath caught in his throat. He spun in a slow circle. The road he'd been driving on, the solid, straight line of I-35, was no longer there. Where it should have been was nothing but a narrow, cracked two-lane strip, overgrown at the edges, faded paint barely visible. No streetlights, no guardrails, no sound of passing cars. Just empty land stretching into the darkness. Panic clawed its way up his spine. He staggered back to his truck, heart hammering, fingers fumbling with the door handle. He climbed in and locked the doors out of instinct. The cab felt like a coffin. Okay. Think. He fired up the engine. Thank God it started, and threw it in gear. Headlights sliced through the dark, illuminating scrub brush, broken fence posts, and the sad little strip of forgotten road. He drove. He didn't know where he was going, but sitting still seemed worse. He figured if he just kept moving, he'd find the highway again. Maybe he'd taken a wrong turn during the swerve. Maybe he was just disoriented, but the road kept going, twisting. In on itself, the land around it growing stranger. Buildings appeared, ruined farmhouses, hollow-eyed barns sagging against the weight of time. Trees stood like skeletons, their branches clawing at the night. The moon, when it showed through the clouds, looked wrong. Too large, too pale, like a dead thing. Gary felt like he was being watched. That was the worst part. The sense of eyes in the dark, just beyond the reach of his headlights. He kept glancing at the mirrors, expecting to see something following him. Then he saw the car again. It appeared in his headlights without warning. Sitting at an angle across the road, its front end caved in, windshield shattered, flames flickering in. The engine block. The same car, the same wreck. The same sense of awful, gut-twisting wrongness. Gary slammed the brakes, tires skidding on loose gravel. He stopped just short of the wreck. This time he didn't get out. He just sat there, hands white-knuckled on the wheel, sweat cold on his back. The woman appeared in the passenger seat. Her face was pale, eyes wide and hollow, mouth frozen in a scream that made no sound. Blood streaked down one side of her head, soaking into the collar of her blouse. She stared at him, through him, as if begging for help or warning him away. Gary threw the truck into reverse, backing up so fast the wheels bounced in the ruts. The wreck flickered like a dying candle flame. There, not there, there again. And then it vanished. Just gone, leaving the road empty and dark. But now the road behind him was gone too. He stopped the truck, heart beating so loud it drowned out everything else. He was trapped, stuck on a stretch of nowhere that didn't exist, haunted by a wreck that shouldn't be. The radio crackled. He jumped, nearly hitting his head on the roof. A voice whispered through the static, "Help me?" His mouth went dry. The voice was faint, distant, like it came from the bottom of a well. A woman's voice, the woman from the wreck. Who are you?" His voice shook. The radio hissed louder. "They never found me." The words chilled him deeper than any cold ever could. Gary stared at the radio as if it would give him answers. Then the headlights flickered, dimmed, and died. The engine coughed and fell silent. Darkness swallowed him whole. Outside, the night pressed close, smothering, silent. Gary sat frozen, listening, waiting. The wind picked up, carrying with it the faint smell of smoke and something else, something sweet and rotten, like old blood. He saw her then in the distance. The woman from the car, standing on the side of the road, watching him, waiting. And Gary knew, deep in his bones, that he'd never find I-35 again.